There's a reason why the Bibi Stockholm barge is not on the front pages of many, if any, newspapers today. And it took me a moment to work it out, because certainly broadcast media, and obviously that includes us, are all over it. And it's because of the pictures and the phone-in potential. So bizarrely, it doesn't work as a front page story in quite the same way that you might expect it would. You don't have, I don't know what the word is, the urgency, the animation, but none of them have spread, not even the Mail. Actually, I haven't got to the Sun yet. I should probably have checked first. Kia's Eco-Zombie. What the hell is that about? So that is quite surprising, given how the government's plan is presumably to garner as much media attention as possible. But they're still getting plenty. That's just my little media 101 for you. It's not particularly pertinent or germane to much that follows, except that I am once again resisting and rejecting the temptation not to talk about it at all. I think Louise Hay, the Labour politician there, making quite a lot of sense. Is it 15 men that are on the boat now out of an asylum backlog well into six figures? That doesn't make sense, according to the laws of logic. The media doesn't obey the laws of logic. Politics stopped obeying the laws of logic in 2016. But the idea that it is, what's the story? The asylum backlog? Because if the asylum backlog is the story, then the destination of 15 asylum seekers is absolutely negligible, irrelevant, and profoundly unimportant. So why is it such a huge story? That will be a question that I will invite you to answer probably in the course of this morning. But it's not the thing that intrigues me most, first up. Part of me wondered yesterday why they're doing it. And there is still room for answers to that question. Part of the answer has been provided by 30p Lee, the potato-headed deputy chairman of the Conservative Party, best known really for lying to a journalist about the identity of a bloke on whose door he was about to knock, and being too thick to realise that he was being recorded on his telephone, talking to his friend, saying, "Pretend you don't know me when I come knocking on your door." And then when he did come knocking on his door and his friend pretended not to know him, I think he started talking about how he'd like to bring back the birch or the cat of nine tails, which gives you precisely the sort of idea you need to know what 30p Lee talks about when he's down the pub. So that was his claim to fame. That was his qualification for being promoted to deputy chairman, being friends with bigots and lying about it to journalists. And that, sadly, in 2023, is pretty much what Rishi Sunak needs from a backbench MP, from the sort of Jonathan Gullis, 30p Lee, Brendan Clark hyphen school of performative idiocy. And so he gets promoted to deputy chairman. And of course, we can sit here and clutch our pearls that the urbane and well-educated Secretary of State for Justice, Alex Chalk, this morning, essentially endorsed 30p Lee Anderson's sub-National Front rhetoric. We can go, oh, that's a shocker. And I fell into that trap. But they knew what they were buying. They knew what they were signing up for. Rishi Sunak knew exactly what he was doing when he promoted a man who'd already said that they can't really campaign on any achievements in the next general election, and they can't do what they did last time, which was to blow smoke up people's backsides about Boris Johnson and tell lies about Brexit, while capitalising on the fact that Jeremy Corbyn was the most spectacularly unpopular Labour leader in living memory. So he said this on record. It's on tape. Essentially admitting the only chance the Tories have got in the next election is to inflate transgender conversations and fight these so-called culture wars. That's how you end up deputy chairman, and that's why you know that you can say with a degree of impunity stuff that, frankly, would have got you thrown out of the British National Party when Nick Griffin was trying to sanitise it shortly before appearing on Question Time 15 or so years ago. How fast the world has fallen. Even Farage would have fought shy in public of saying something like F off back to France. But the world has changed, and what was unacceptable has become not just acceptable, but Tory party policy. So spare me the sort of pearl-clutching shock and horror that a Secretary of State for Justice should join in with this sort of racist baiting. It's the plan. That's why he was hired. That's why he is there, and that's why he's saying it. They know it's not true. I just think about the logic of 30p Lee's position. They should F off back to France. But he wants French authorities to arrest people making their way towards the United Kingdom. So by any even vaguely logical analysis, which I grant you is too big an ask for the food bank man, he would want British authorities to arrest refugees trying to make their way to France. Otherwise, it's one rule for us and another rule for everybody else. If it's wrong for them to come here and French authorities should be trying to stop them, then if they get here and decide to make their way back because they don't like the accommodation, then it should be up to our authorities to arrest them in order to prevent them from doing the thing that he's passionately opposed to when the traffic is moving in the opposite direction. But again, it's not about logic. It's not about the law. It's about throwing red meat and, if you like, turning bigotry and ignorance into official Tory party policy. Which is why when Nick asked Alex Chalk this morning about these comments, Alex Chalk had no choice but to defend them. He probably didn't foresee that being his job when he decided to go into politics. I'm going to have to appear on national radio and stick up for a bloke who makes the National Front sound almost palatable. But hey-ho, that's what I signed up for. And Rishi Sunak's promise of professionalism, accountability and integrity means that I, Alex Chalk, Justice Secretary, have to appear on national radio today and say stuff like this.
The British people, we're fair-minded people, but what we don't think is fair is to say that people who arrive illegally should be profiting from that illegality in 4-star accommodation. That's why we're looking at disused military bases. That's why we're looking at the Bibby Stockholm. So we will provide accommodation. Yeah, it's not going to be the Ritz. It's going to be pretty austere. It's going to be pretty functional. But that's not unreasonable.
Why is he lying about the accommodation that asylum seekers already receive? Why is he talking about the Ritz and 4-star hotels? Now, there might be a hotel near you. There are a couple in Kidderminster, actually. I think they were 3 rather than 4 that did end up housing asylum seekers. But at the point they started housing asylum seekers, they ceased to be 4-star hotels. They became asylum seeker not detention centres because you're free to go, but holding centres, if you like. The idea that an asylum seeker has moved into one of these hotels and can avail themselves every day of the room service menu and the facilities is not just silly, it's disgusting. It's a blatant lie. We've put a call in to the Justice Secretary asking for examples of hotels where asylum seekers receive the same level of 4-star service that paying customers would have received before the hotel was repurposed. We're waiting to hear back. They tried to pass us on to the Home Office at first, claiming that it was a claim that had been made by them, but I heard the Justice Secretary make that claim on LBC this morning, and therefore I think he should account for his claim that 4-star hotel accommodation was previously being supplied to asylum seekers. We'll let him off the Ritz comment because that can be a figure of speech, but it's a very deliberate figure of speech designed to make you think that these asylum seekers are enjoying a better standard of living than you do. I'm getting texts also about them being frightened of the water. So I don't know why they're coming into the studio, but if you had crossed the channel in a dinghy, knowing full well that people had died making the same journey, it's possible you'd be a little less relaxed about water subsequently than you were before you got in that death trap. So there we are. Another point that I need to make at 11 minutes after 10 this morning is that my anger is not the right word. Disgust and sadness. My disgust and sadness at what this country has become, a country where 30p Lee Anderson can do a National Front tribute act in a national newspaper and be defended by the Secretary of State for Justice. My sadness and disgust at what we have become is also part of the point. So Suella Braverman, Robert Jenrick, Rishi Sunak, they hope that people like, well, there's only about 3 of us in British public life. There's basically me, Carol Vorderman and Gary Lineker now. But we're upsetting people like us is the point of the policy. That's it. Oh, great, yes. It's upsetting them. Only I, out of those 3, of course, have any form of media profile where I can offer up my opinions. Gary and Carol rely on Twitter. But even that is too much for the right-wing media to bear. Any syllable of dissent, anybody daring to suggest that we're actually a bit better than this, lads. We are just better than this. Even if you have been misled about the international law on the question of refugees and safe countries and first countries, even if you've been misled about that, it doesn't make you someone who cheers some bozo shouting F off back to France if you don't like it. That's a deliberate move. And anyone speaking up against it is to be portrayed as an enemy of the people or part of some sort of fifth column. 13 minutes after 10. Is the time. So the question of why they're doing it has many, many answers. They're not doing it to solve the problem. because they caused the problem. They like the problem. They relish the problem. Suella Braverman today gets to paint targets on new backs. She gets to paint targets on the backs of lawyers, doing with lawyers what they've previously done with refugees. So you find me a dodgy lawyer and a corrupt Tory will pretend that all lawyers are dodgy. Just as you find me a law-breaking asylum seeker and a corrupt, fascist, racist sympathiser will pretend that all asylum seekers are criminals. It's easily done. It leads to Donald Trump's ludicrous comments about the colour of M&M chocolate. So that's part of the reason as well. It upsets all the right people. It paints targets on the back of distractions, because the last thing we want to do is admit that we've been in power for 13 years and every single thing that's wrong with the country today is on us. We've got to have the conversation about something else. We can't have it about our record, or even, now that Keir Starmer has replaced Jeremy Corbyn, we can't even make the conversation about the opposition, really, although we're going to try some nonsense about environmental protests. So we can't make the conversation about our 13-year track record. We can't make it about solving the problem, because we caused the problem and we need the problem in order to be able to promise that we're the ones to fix the problem without mentioning that we actually caused the problem. It's not about the numbers of people that have been put on the barge, because that is a tiny fraction of a tiny fraction of a tiny fraction of the number of people waiting to have their appeals processed. And it's not about the reality of any of the situation that's under discussion, because if it was, the Secretary of State for Justice would not be lying about 4-star hotels and the Ritz, fairly secure in the knowledge that the country has become so corrupted by this sort of bigoted bile that he'll be able to do so more or less unchallenged. It's 10:15. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So which way into it do you prefer? Which way into it do you prefer? I think I'm going to ask why Alex Chalk is lying about 4-star hotels. I want you to think about your answer. I'll play you the clip again, not the Lee Anderson clip, the hotels clip. I want you to have a think and just tell me why. Why 4-star hotels? There is no earthly way that any asylum seeker in this country has received the same level of hospitality in a hotel that has once boasted 4 stars and may well boast them again, that a paying guest in a 4-star hotel receives. They will not have the same food. They will not have the same accommodation. They may well be required to share rooms, all sorts of... I mean, it's so obviously untrue. Why is he telling you that lie?